The day my niece told me I wasn't welcome in my own family, I was standing in my kitchen wearing my husband's old flannel shirt and holding a sponge that had gone cold in my hand. The text message came through at 7:32 in the morning, just as I was pouring milk into Maya's cereal bowl. "Keep away from our home," Vanessa wrote. "Dependents not allowed here." I read it 3 times before I understood that she meant me. That the home she was talking about wasn't her apartment across town or her father's house on the hill. She meant the Wari house. The furniture business. The only place my husband had ever worked. The place where he had spent 30 years of his life sanding oak and staining pine and building things that lasted longer than people. I was a dependent now. A stray. A problem to be managed. I put the phone face down on the counter and finished pouring the milk. Maya was 6 years old then, with her father's dark eyes and a small scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off her bike. She didn't ask who had texted. She never did. Children know things. They feel the cold drafts that adults pretend don't exist. "Mama," she said, "are we still going to visit Grandma's grave today?" I told her yes, of course we were, because it was her father's birthday and we always visited his mother's grave on his birthday, even though she had died before Maya was born. It was a small ritual my husband had sta root, and I had kept it going because rituals are the threads that hold a broken thing together. I had been a nurse in the remarry for 17 years. I had served 2 tours in Canada. I had held boys who were really old enough to vote while they bled out in the dirt. I had watched the light leave their eyes and I had written letters to their mothers in handwriting so shaky I could really read it myself. That was the kind of woman I was before I met Frank. A woman who could stitch a wound in the dark. A woman who could see a 150 pounds of wounded soldier on her back through gunfire. A woman who had never once in her life been called a dependent. Frank changed all of that. He was a quiet man, broad-shouldered and slow-moving, like a tree that had grown in the wrong soil but somehow survived. He worked at his brother's furniture Wari house from the time he was 18 until the day he died. He never complained. He never asked for more than what was given. He came home smelling of sawdust and glue and he would lift Maya onto his shoulders and spin her around the living room until she shrieked with laughter. He was the kind of man who fixed things. Not just chairs and tables. The kind of man who fixed people. He fixed me. He took a woman who had seen too much death and he reminded her that life was still happening. That was what I was thinking about when I walked into the Wari house that morning. Not the text message. Not Vanessa's words. Just Frank. I wanted to see his locker. I wanted to smell the sawdust that had clung to his coat. I wanted to stand in the place where he had spent most of his waking hours and feel close to him for a few minutes. It was a small thing to ask. A widow's right. A wife's right. But when I pushed open the heavy metal door, I knew immediately that I was not going to get what I had come for. The Wari house was the same as it had always been. Gray concrete floor. High ceilings with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped bees. Rows of half-finished furniture covered in drop cloths. The smell of varnish and old wood. But something was different. The air was colder. The silence was sharper. And at the reception desk, perched on a stool like a queen on a throne, was Vanessa. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her hair was pulled back tight against her scalp, and her nails were long and red, like little warning flags. She didn't look up when I walked in. She kept filing her nails with a small metal file, the sound scraping through the quiet like a mouse in the walls. I stood there for a full minute, waiting. My knee was aching from the cold. It always ached in the mornings, a souvenir from a fall I had taken in the mountains of Afghanistan. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, and the movement must have caught her eye because she finally lifted her head. "Aunt Rose," she said. Her voice was flat. No rmth. No surprise. It was the same voice she used when she called to tell me Frank had died. What are you doing here? I came to clean out his locker, I said. And to pick up his last paycheck. I called ahead. Someone said I could come in this morning. She put the nail file down and folded her hands on the desk. His locker was cleaned out yesterday. We had to clear it for the new employee STA routing next week. All of his personal items were discarded. Standard road procedure. I felt something shift in my chest. A small crack in the wall I had been building around myself. Discarded, I repeated. What was in it? Old work gloves. Some photos. A thermos. Nothing of value. She said it like she was reading a grocery list. The paycheck is being held pending final accounting. We have to make sure all company property has been returned before we release final wages. I took a step closer to the desk. My hands were trembling, so I shoved them in the pockets of my coat. What company property? He didn't take anything. He wasn't that kind of man. Your husband, Vanessa said, leaning back on her stool, was a good worker. I won't deny that. But he was also a sentimental man. We have records of missing tools. Nothing major. Just a few items that can't be accounted for. Standard road procedure is to hold the final paycheck until everything is resolved. I knew she was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes flicked to the side, the way her lips pressed together too tightly. I had spent 17 years reading the faces of dying men. I knew when someone was telling me a story that wasn't true. But I didn't have the strength to fight her. Not that morning. Not with Frank's memory still so fresh in my mind. Vanessa, I said quietly, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want his last check. We have bills to pay. Maya needs new shoes for school. Something crossed her face then. Not sympathy. Not pity. It was something sharper. Che Ryder. This is the problem with this family, she said, standing up and walking around the desk. Everyone expects handouts. My father built this business from nothing. He gave your husband a job when no one else would. He gave you a place at the table. And what did you do? You showed up with a child who wasn't even his. The words hit me like a physical blow. I swayed on my feet. Frank was her father. He raised her. He loved her. Frank was a kind man, Vanessa said, walking toward me. Too kind. He had a weakness for strays. We all knew it. But this business is not a charity. It's not a shelter for dependent women and their illegitimate children. It's a business. And in a business, you have to make hard decisions. She stopped 2 feet away from me. Close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive. The kind of thing that covers up the smell of everything real. The insurance policy, she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, was a key man policy. It was designed to protect the business in the event of a loss of a vital employee. Your husband was a vital employee. The policy pays out to the business. Not to his widow. Not to his child. To the business. So any money you were hoping to see from that policy is going to cover the losses we incurred due to his sudden absence. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I had read the policy. Frank had shown it to me years ago. He had told me it was meant to protect me if anything happened to him. He had promised me that his family would take care of me. He had believed it with his whole heart. And now his niece was standing in front of me, telling me that his promise meant nothing. I know what you're thinking, Vanessa said. You're thinking I'm being cruel. You're thinking I'm heartless. But I'm just doing what's best for this company. The company that my father built. The company that has kept this family alive for 3 generations. I'm not going to let it all fall apart because of sentimental nonsense and misplaced loyalty. She walked back to her stool and sat down, picking up her nail file again. You should go, Aunt Rose. Take the bus home. Put your feet up. Stop worrying about things that don't concern you. Frank is gone. You need to accept that. And you need to accept that you are no longer part of this family. I stood there for a long moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of varnish filled my lungs. I thought about Frank. I thought about the way he had held my hand in the hospital when Maya was born. The way he had cried when they put her in his arms. The way he had whispered to her, "You're my whole world, little one." He had given everything to this family. His time. His strength. His loyalty. And they had turned his memory into a regaining chip. That I thought about Maya, waiting for me at the bus stop with her pink backpack and her small, hopeful eyes. She didn't know about any of this. She didn't know that her father's family had called her illegitimate. She didn't know that the money her father had worked so hard to earn was being held hostage. She just knew that her mother was sad. And that her father wasn't coming home. I took a step back. Then another. My niece screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. I walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. When I reached the exit, I paused and turned around. Vanessa was watching me with a small smile on her face, the kind of smile that says she thinks she has won. You're right about one thing, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. This is a business. And in business, you have to make hard decisions. So here's a hard decision for you. You can keep the paycheck. You can keep the insurance money. You can keep everything you think you've taken from me. Because none of it matters. Not really. What matters is that I know exactly who you are. And one day, Vanessa, that knowledge is going to become very expensive for you. Her smile faltered. Just a little. Just enough for me to see it. That I pushed open the door and walked out into the cold morning air. That the bus ride home took 45 minutes. I sat in the back, staring out the window at the familiar streets of the town where I had lived for 30 years. Everything looked the same. The same coffee shop. The same hardwa store. The same church steeple rising above the trees. But everything felt different. I was different. I had walked into that Wari house as a grieving widow. I had walked out as a woman with a crack in her armor. But cracks, I knew from years of patching up broken soldiers, were where the light got in. When I got home, Maya was sitting on the front steps with her backpack at her feet. She had been waiting for me. She always waited for me. Mama, she said, standing up and brushing off her dress, did you get Daddy's stuff? I knelt down in front of her, ignoring the pain in my knee. No, sweetie. They didn't have it ready. Her face fell for just a second, but then she smiled. It was the smile she had inherited from her father. The one that said, "It's okay. I'm okay. We're okay." "That's okay," she said. "We can try again tomorrow." I pulled her into my arms and held her as tight as I'd read. She smelled like sunshine and soap and the faint hint of peanut butter from her lunch. She was so small. So fragile. So completely dependent on me. And for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of that word. Dependent. That I had been called many things in my life. Soldier. Nurse. Hero. Widow. But never dependent. The word felt like a cage. Like a label that had been pasted onto my chest without my permission. And I realized, as I held my daughter in the cold morning air, that I had two choices. I could accept the label. I could shrink into it. I could let Vanessa and her father and everyone else in that family tell me what I was and what I was not. Or I could burn it. That I looked down at Maya's dark eyes, her father's eyes, and I made a decision. It wasn't a loud decision. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet kind of decision that settles into your bones like cold water. I was going to build something. Not for revenge. Not to prove anyone wrong. But because I had a child who needed a future. And because the only way to stop being a dependent was to become something that no one could take away. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and a spiral notebook. ISTA root writing. I wrote down every skill I had. Every connection. Every tiny seed of an idea that had ever crossed my mind. The list was short. Pathetically short. But it was a START. I wrote down the word cobbler because it was the only thing I could make that didn't come from a box. I wrote down the name of a young soldier I had held in Kandahar, a boy who had told me about his mother's peach cobbler before he died. I wrote down the name of the church where Ella R.A., the soldier's mother, worked in the community kitchen. And then I wrote down one more word, the word that Frank had whispered to me on the day we brought Maya home from the hospital. Always. It was the word that had kept me going through every dark night. The word that had held me together when everything else was falling apart. And it was the word that I was going to hang over the door of whatever I built next. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know where the money would come from. I didn't know if I had the strength to fight the kind of fight that was coming. But I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to let Vanessa's words be the last words I ever heard about my worth. I was not going to let my daughter grow up believing that her mother was a burden. I was going to take the ashes of my old life and I was going to build a new one. Not because I wanted to be successful. But because I needed to show Maya that no one gets to decide who you are except you. The tea had gone cold by the time I closed the notebook. Outside, the wind rattled the windows and the first snow of the season began to fall. I sat there in the quiet, thinking about Frank, thinking about the Wari house, thinking about the long, hard road ahead. And then I thought about the text message. Dependence not allowed here. I laughed a little. A small, bitter laugh. Because the thing about dependence is that they don't stay dependents forever. Sometimes, they turn into the thing that grows around the roots of the tree, so strong that the tree can't survive without it. Sometimes, they become the vines that hold everything together. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know if I would succeed or fail. But I knew that tomorrow, I was going to wake up in START building. And I knew that no matter what happened, I would always be more than a dependent. I got up from the table and walked to Maya's room. She was asleep, her small hand tucked under her cheek, her breathing soft and even. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her hair. We're going to be okay, I whispered. I promise. But even as I said it, I knew that the road ahead was dark. Vanessa had taken my husband's paycheck, his insurance, his memory. She had taken my place in the family. And she had told me, in no uncertain terms, that I was not welcome anywhere near the life I had known. I had nothing but a small house, a child, and a dream that felt too big to hold. I had no money. No allies. No clear or path forward. But I had one thing. One small, fragile thing that no one could take away. That I had the will to fight. And sometimes, that's enough. The next morning I woke before the sun. The house was cold, the furnace had been struggling for weeks, and I had been putting off calling the repairman because I couldn't afford the service fee. I lay in bed for a long moment, ring at the crack in the ceiling that looked like a map of a river I had never seen. Frank had always said he would fix it. He had 100 plans for this house. A new roof. A better fence for the backyard road. A swing set for Maya that wouldn't rust. He never got to any of them. I got up and dressed in the dark, pulling on the same jeans I had worn for 3 days, the same flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of Frank's aftershave. In the kitchen, I made coffee with water that was really hot and poured it into a chipped mug that had once been part of a set we got for our wedding. 3 of the mugs had broken over the years. This one was the last survivor. Maya came down at 7, her hair a tangle of curls that she had tried to brush herself. She was wearing a dress that was too thin for the weather, a pink thing with a torn hem that she had pulled out of the donation box at church. I had tried to get her to wear the sweater I had bought her last winter, but she refused. "It makes me look like a potato," she had said. So I let her wear the dress. Some battles weren't worth fighting. "Are we going to the Wari house again today?" she asked, climbing onto her chair. I poured her a bowl of cereal and set it in front of her. "No, sweetie. They don't have his things ready. I'll call them later." She nodded and ate her cereal in silence. She didn't ask more questions. Maya had learned that questions sometimes led to answers she didn't want to hear. I watched her eat, her small hands wrapped around the spoon, and I felt something twist in my chest. She was so small. So trusting. And I was failing her. That was the thought that circled my mind like a vulture. I was failing her. The bus ride to the community center took 40 minutes. I had found a flyer in the church bulletin, a small notice about a free workshop for small business owners. I didn't know why I had torn it out and stuffed it in my pocket. I had never owned a business in my life. I didn't know the first thing about licenses or permits or profit margins. But something about the words had stuck with me. Build something of your own. The words were like a splinter under my skin. They bothered me. They stayed with me. So I went. The community center was a low brick building with flaking paint and a sign that said, "All are welcome." The words had been painted over so many times that the letters bled into each other. I walked through the front door and into a room that smelled like floor wax and instant coffee. There were 8 people sitting in folding chairs around a metal table. A woman at the front was holding a clipboard and wearing a name tag that said, Diana. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw her eyes scan me quickly. The worn coat. The limp. The chipped coffee mug I had brought with me because I couldn't afford to buy one at the convenience store. I waited for the dismissive glance, the look that said, "You don't belong here." But it didn't come. Instead, she smiled and gestured to an empty chair. "Welcome," she said. "Take a seat. We're just getting route." I sat down and looked around the table. The others were a mix of people. An older man with a hearing aid who was trying to start a lawn business. A young woman with a baby on her lap who made candles in her kitchen and wanted to sell them online. A middle-aged couple who had lost their jobs at the factory and were trying to figure out what came next. They all looked tired. They all looked red. But they also looked like they were trying. And that was enough. Diana root the workshop by asking everyone to introduce themselves and explain why they were there. When it was my turn, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. The words felt too heavy to speak. Too raw. I looked down at my chipped mug and then back up at the room full of strangers. "I'm Rose," I said finally. "I used to be a nurse in the remarry. Now I'm a widow. And I have a daughter. I don't know why I'm here. I don't have a business. I don't have any money. I need to figure out how to keep going." The room was quiet. I expected awkward silence. Instead, the old man with the hearing aid nodded slowly. "We're all figuring that out," he said. "That's why we're here." The workshop lasted 3 hours. Diana talked about business plans and target audiences and the importance of finding a niche. I took notes in a spiral notebook that was half full of Maya's math homework. My handwriting was shaky. My thoughts were scattered. But I wrote down every word. After the workshop, Diana pulled me aside. Rose, she said, could I speak with you for a moment? I nodded, bracing myself. I had been told my whole life that I was too quiet, too passive, too easy to overlook. I expected her to tell me I wasn't the right fit for the workshop. That I needed to come back when I had a real plan. Instead, she said, I know what it's like to start over. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and the kind of calm eyes that had seen storms. She wore a simple blazer and a pair of sensible flats. Nothing flashy. Nothing trying too hard. I was a corporate lawyer for 20 years, she said. I had a husband, a house, a partnership track. Then I found out he had been draining our joint accounts for years, gambling. Debt. He took everything. Left me with nothing but my name and a stack of bills. I had to rebuild from scratch. I opened my mouth to say something, but she held up her hand up. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I see that look in your eyes. The one that says you don't think you can do it. The one that says you're waiting for someone to tell you you're not good enough. And I'm telling you that you are good enough. You just don't know it yet. I blinked hard, trying to keep the TRS from forming. I don't have a plan, I said. I don't have any money. I don't have anything. You have a daughter, she said. And you have a story. That's more than most people have when they start. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. This is for a small business grant. It's designed for veterans and their families. You qualify. It's not a lot. But it's enough to get STA. I took the card, my fingers trembling. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, she said. And then come back next week and tell me what you've decided. I walked out of the community center feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone had seen me and hadn't looked away. Heavier because the weight of possibility was almost as crushing as the weight of failure. That afternoon, I picked Maya up from school and took her to the park. She swung on the swings while I sat on the bench and read at the business card in my hand. The grant was for $10,000 $10,000. It sounded like a fortune and nothing at all at the same time. It was enough to buy ingredients, equipment, a few months of rent. It wasn't enough to fix the roof or pay off the mortgage. But it was something. Mama, Maya called out, are you coming to push me? I tucked the card into my pocket and walked over to the swings. I pushed her high into the air, watching her laugh as the wind caught her hair. She was so beautiful. So unburdened. I wanted to keep her that way for as long as possible. Tell me a story, Mama, she said. Tell me about Daddy. I thought for a moment. Your daddy was the kindest man I ever knew, I said. He never raised his voice. Never held a grudge. He believed that everyone deserved a second chance. Even the people who didn't deserve it. Was he a good worker? She asked. The best, I said. He could fix anything. A chair. A table. A broken heart. He fixed me, sweetie. He fixed me. She looked down at me from the top of her ARC. What did he fix in you? I stopped pushing and walked around to face her. I knelt down in the wood chips, ignoring the pain in my knee. He taught me that I was worth loving, I said. He taught me that I didn't have to carry everything alone. He taught me that it was okay to ask for help. Maya's small face was serious. Are you carrying everything alone now, Mama? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had held dying soldiers and a newborn baby and a husband who had slipped away too soon. No, I said. I have you. And I have people who want to help. I just have to let them. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Children often understand more than we give them credit for. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table again. The spiral notebook was open in front of me. The business card was next to it. I read at the numbers, the names, the possibilities. And then I took a deep breath and root writing. First, I wrote down the things I had. I had an old food truck that Ella, the soldier's mother, had offered me. I had her phone number. I had her blessing. I had a recipe for peach cobbler that my grandmother had passed down to my mother, and my mother had passed down to me. I had 2 hands that still remembered how to work. Then I wrote down the things I needed. Ingredients. A generator. A new paint job for the truck. A permit from the city. A license to operate. The list was long. The list was daunting. But it was a list. And a list was a start. Finally, I wrote down the thing I read most. Vanessa. The Wari house. The words, dependence not allowed here. I wrote them down and I read at them until they root to blur. I had been running from those words all week. They had followed me like a shadow, whispering in my ear, telling me I had no right to dream. But writing them down was different. Writing them down made them something I could look at. Something I could face. That I picked up my phone and called Ella. It was late, almost 10, but she answered on the second ring. Rose, she said. I was hoping you'd call. I told her about the grant. I told her about the workshop. I told her about the notebook and the list and the FIA that had been eating at me all week. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she laughed. It was a wah-rm laugh, the kind that came from deep in her chest. Rose, she said, do you know what my son told me about you? He said you were the bravest woman he had ever met. He said you held his hand while he was dying and you didn't flinch. You didn't look away. You stayed with him until the very end. That's who you are, Rose. That's who you've always been. I didn't know what to say. So I just listened. The truck is yours, she said. It's been sitting in the church parking lot for 5 years. No one's using it. No one's even looking at it. If you want it, it's yours. Paint it whatever color you want. Put your name on it. Make it yours. I thanked her, my voice cracking. And then I hung up and sat in the quiet, ring at the kitchen wall. The crack in the ceiling was still there. The furnace was still broken. The mortgage was still due. But something had shifted. Something small and fragile and infinitely precious. The next morning, I called the number on the grant application. I filled out the forms. I wrote my story in tiny, cramped letters, the story of a soldier's wife, a nurse, a mother, a widow. I mailed it with the last of my stamps. And then I walked to the church parking lot and saw the old food truck for the first time. It was a sad sight. A rusted hulk of metal with a faded sign that had once read, Ella Ra's Kitchen. The tires were flat. The windows were cracked. The paint was peeling. But underneath all of that, I saw something else. I saw potential. I saw a beginning. I stood there for a long time, running my hand over the rusted hood. Maya was at school. The house was empty. The world was quiet. And I made a decision. I was going to fix this truck. I was going to paint it pink, the color of my mother's peonies. I was going to fill it with the smell of peaches and cinnamon. And I was going to drive it to the remarry market and the city festival and anywhere else that people gathered. I was going to sell my cobbler and tell my story. And I was going to prove to Vanessa, to her family, to the whole world, that I was not a dependent. I found a bucket in the church storage room and filled it with water and soap. I scrubbed the truck for 2 hours. The rust didn't come off. The peeling paint didn't magically disappear. But I didn't see a re. I was doing something. I was moving Four-Way Road at noon. Ella R.A. came out of the church with a tray of sandwiches. She sat down on the curb and watched me work. She said, my son used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. I stopped scrubbing and looked at her. I'm terrified, I admitted. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have what it takes. She smiled, her face soft and that's exactly why you're going to succeed. The ones who think they have it all figured out are usually the ones who fail. But the ones who are afraid, the ones who know how much they don't know, they're the ones who RN. And they're the ones who keep going. I went back to scrubbing. But something in my chest felt lighter. Not because I was no longer afraid. But because I was no longer letting the fear stop me. That evening, I picked up Maya and brought her to see the truck. She stood in front of it, her eyes wide. Mama, she said, is this yours? Not yet, I said. But it's going to be. She walked around the truck, touching the rust, peering through the cracked windows. Then she turned to me with a serious expression. Can I help you paint it? I want to paint it pink. I knelt down and hugged her. Of course, you can. We'll paint it together. That night, we sat in the kitchen and drew pictures of what the truck should look like. Maya drew flowers on the side. She drew a giant peach with a smiley face. She drew a sign that said, Rose's Kitchen, in wobbly letters. I looked at her drawings and felt something crack open in my chest. Not the kind of crack that lets the darkness in. The kind that lets the light out. I called Diana that night to tell her I was going to apply for the grant. She listened to my plan and then said, Rose, I want to tell you something. I've been doing this work for 10 years. I've seen hundreds of people start businesses. And I can tell you this, the ones who succeed are the ones who believe in themselves even when no one else does. Do you believe in yourself? I paused. The question was harder than it should have been. I'm trying, I said. Trying is enough, she said. Just keep trying. I hung up and looked at the notebook. The list was still there. The FIA-RS were still there. But I had taken a step. I had scrubbed a truck. I had called a number. I had read my story. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I had root to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Before I went to bed, I walked past the bathroom mirror and stopped. I looked at my face, tired and worn, the face of a woman who had seen too much loss. And I said out loud, you are not a dependent. The words felt strange on my tongue. Unfamiliar. But they also felt true. I said them again. You are not a dependent. I walked to my room and lay down in the dark, listening to the wind outside. The house creaked. The furnace rattled. And somewhere in the distance, I heard a train whistle. I thought about Frank. I thought about the way he had looked at me on our wedding day. I thought about the way he had held Maya when she was first born. And I thought about the way he had whispered to me, always. I closed my eyes and let the word wash over me. Always. I had always been a fighter. I had always been a survivor. And I was always going to find a way. But in the quiet of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was only just beginning. Vanessa had taken my paycheck. She had taken my husband's insurance. She had taken my place in the family. And I had no idea what else she was capable of taking. The road ahead was uncertain, and the enemies were closer than I wanted to admit. That I fell asleep with that thought in my mind, and I dreamed of the pink truck driving down a long, empty road, with Maya's laugh echoing in the wind. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of scrubbing rust, replacing tires, and learning the language of an engine that had not been root in half a decade. I spent my mornings at the church parking lot, my afternoons at the librairie urging permits, and my evenings sitting at the kitchen table with Maya, who had taken to drawing pictures of the truck on every scrap of paper she could find. She had named it, the Pink Dream, and had already planned out the menu in her head. Peach cobbler. Peach cobbler with ice cream. Peach cobbler with whipped cream. Peach cobbler with sprinkles. She was 6. She believed in sprinkles the way I believed in second chances. The grant money came through on a Tuesday. I received the email while I was standing in the RDWA store, holding a can of pink paint that I had been ring at for 10 minutes. The notification pinged on my phone, and I almost dropped the paint can. $10,000 RS. It was sitting in my bank account, waiting for me to spend it. I stood there in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by paint swatches and power tools, and I cried. Not loud sobs, not the kind of crying that draws attention. Just quiet tears that rolled down my cheeks and dripped onto the concrete floor. The store clerk, a young man with a nose ring and kind eyes, pretended not to notice. I appreciated that. The first thing I did was buy the paint. 5 gallons of soft pink, the color of my mother's peonies, the color of the sunset on the last night Frank and I had spent together. I paid for it with a debit card that had been sitting at 0 for months. The transaction went through. The machine beeped. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile thing, like a bird with a broken wing. But it was there that I spent the next week painting the truck. Maya helped, of course. She stood on a step stool with a tiny brush, painting flowers on the side in bright yellow and green. She painted a peach with a smiley face on the back door. She painted the words, Rose's Kitchen, in wobbly letters that made my heart ache every time I looked at them. The truck was still old. Still dented. Still holding its history in every scratch and stain. But it was beautiful. It was ours. Ella R.A. came by every day with sandwiches and advice. She told me stories about her son, the soldier I had held in Kandahar. His name was M.A. Rakus. He had been 19 when he died, just a boy really, with a gap-toothed smile and a love for his mother's cobbler that bordered on obsession. He had told me about it in his final moments, his voice weak but his eyes bright. My mama makes the best cobbler in the world, he had said. She uses peaches from her own tree. She says the secret is love. I don't know if that's true, but it tastes like it. I had promised him I would tell her. I had promised him I would make sure she knew how much he loved her. And now I was standing in her church parking lot, painting a truck with her son's memory painted on every surface. You're doing more than you know, Ella R.A. said one afternoon, handing me a cup of lemonade. You're keeping him alive. Every time you make that cobbler, you're telling his story. And stories don't die. I nodded, too choked up to speak that the mechanical work was the hardest part. I knew nothing about engines. Nothing about generators. Nothing about the complicated wiring that made a food truck come alive. I spent hours watching YouTube videos, my phone propped against a stack of paint cans, my hands covered in grease. I learned what a carburetor was. I learned how to change a tire. I learned that the generator had a faulty connection that would have started a fire if I had turned it on without checking. I fixed it myself, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. The feeling of turning that key and he ring the engine roar to life was better than any paycheck I had ever received. Then came the permit process. The city required a license to operate a mobile food unit. They required proof of insurance. They required a health inspection. They required a background check. I filled out forms until my handwriting cramped. I made phone calls until my voice was hoarse. I stood in line at the municipal building for 3 hours, clutching a folder full of documents, while the woman at the counter told me I was missing a signature. You need a co-signer, she said, not looking up from her screen. Someone with established credit. A business partner. I don't have a business partner, I said. I'm doing this alone. She shrugged. Then you're going to need a letter of support from a registered business owner. That's the requirement. I left the municipal building with my folder tucked under my arm and a new weight pressing down on my shoulders. A letter of support. From a registered business owner. I didn't know any registered business owners. I didn't know anyone who would vouch for a widow with a pink food truck and a dream that was already rooting to feel foolish. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of me. Maya was asleep. The house was quiet. I read at the forms, the checklists, the requirements that seemed designed to keep people like me out. People without money. Without connections. Without the right last name that I thought about calling Diana. But I had already asked her for too much. The grant. The advice. The encouragement. I couldn't ask her for one more thing that I thought about calling Ella R.A. But she had already given me the truck. She had given me her son's memory. I couldn't ask for more. I thought about giving up. Just walking away. Selling the truck for scrap and using the money to pay the next mortgage payment. It would be easier. It would be simpler. I could go back to being invisible, back to being the quiet widow who kept her head down and didn't make trouble. Then I thought about Vanessa. I thought about the way she had looked at me in the Wari house, her eyes cold, her words sharp. I thought about the text message. Dependents not allowed here. I thought about the way she had said my daughter's name like it was a dirty word. And I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger. Not quite. Something older. Something deeper. Something that had been buried under years of grief and exhaustion and the quiet acceptance of being overlooked. I took out my phone and called the only registered business owner I knew. The one I had been avoiding. The one whose voice I still heard in my dreams. My brother-in-law, H.A. rolled. Vanessa's father. He answered on the third ring. His voice was gruff, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years working orders at employees. Hello, H.A. rolled, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. It's Rose. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, the slow, heavy breaths of a man who had been caught off guard. Rose. This is a surprise. Is everything all right? I need a favor, I said. A letter of support for my business permit. You're a registered business owner. You can vouch for me. Another long pause. I could almost hear the HRS turning in his head. What business? I'm rooting a food truck. The old truck from Ella Ra's church. I'm going to sell peach cobbler at the F.A. Ramirez Market and the City Festival. I have a grant. I have a plan. I just need a co-signer for the permit. He laughed. It was a short, dry laugh that held no humor. A food truck, Rose, what are you doing? You're 60 years old. You have a bad knee. You have a child to raise. Why would you start a food truck? Because I need to provide for my daughter, I said. Because I can't afford to wait for the insurance money that your daughter has decided to withhold. Because I'm not going to sit in my house and wait to be saved. He was quiet for a moment. Vanessa told me about your visit to the Wari house. She said you were upset. She told you she called my daughter illegitimate, I said. She told me I was a dependent. She told me I wasn't welcome in the family. Your daughter, H.A. rolled. The one you raised. I heard him exhale, a long, slow breath. Vanessa is a hard woman. She learned that from me. But she's right about one thing. This business is everything. It's all I have. It's all I've ever built. I can't let sentimentality ruin it. I'm not asking you to ruin anything, I said. I'm asking for a letter. One piece of paper. That's all. Why should I help you, Rose, after everything that's happened after Frank died and left you with nothing but problems? I closed my eyes. The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I could have listed all the reasons. The years I had spent at Frank's side, supporting him while he worked for H.A. Rold's company. The Christmases I had hosted, the birthday parties I had planned, the family gatherings I had organized. All the small, invisible work that kept the family together. But I didn't. Because I knew none of it mattered to H.A. Rold. He didn't see the invisible work. He only saw the visible failures. Because I'm still your family, I said finally. Because Frank was your brother. Because Maya is your niece. And because somewhere, buried under all that pride and business sense, you know that what Vanessa did was wrong. He was silent for so long that I thought he had hung up. But then I heard him clear his throat. I'll think about it, he said. Don't call me again. He hung up before I could respond. I sat at the kitchen table, sta ring at the phone in my hand. It was a small victory. He hadn't said no. He hadn't said yes either, but he hadn't said no. It was more than I had expected. It was a crack in the wall. And cracks were where the light got in. The next morning, I went back to the church parking lot and sta route cleaning the inside of the truck. The stove was ancient but functional. The refrigerator hummed when I plugged it in. The counters were stained and SCA red, but they could be scrubbed. I spent the morning with a bucket of soapy water and a sponge, scrubbing away the residue of years of neglect. By the time the sun was high overhead, the inside of the truck looked almost presentable. Almost like something that could be used. Maya came by after school with Ella R.A. She climbed into the truck and looked around, her eyes wide. Mama, it's beautiful. It's still a work in progress, I said. But it's getting there. She walked over to the stove and touched the burners with her small fingers. Can we make a cobbler in here right now? I laughed. We don't have any peaches yet. We don't have any ingredients. We need to wait until we get the permit and buy supplies. Let's go get supplies, she said. Right now. Today. I looked at Ella R.A., who was smiling. Go, she said. Take her to the grocery store. Buy the ingredients. I'll watch the truck. I took Maya to the grocery store and bought a bag of peaches, a bag of flour, a bag of sugar, and a ton of butter. It was a small purchase, really enough for a few batches. But it felt monumental. It felt like a beginning. That evening, we made the first cobbler in the truck. It wasn't fancy. The oven took forever to heat up. The peaches were a little too ripe. The crust was a little too thick. But we sat on the ground behind the truck with paper plates and plastic forks, eating cobbler that dripped with butter and sugar. Maya had cobbler on her chin, her nose, her fingers. She was laughing. I was laughing. For the first time in months, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Joy. See, Mama, Maya said, holding up a sticky spoon. We did it. I looked at the truck, pink and imperfect and full of hope. I looked at my daughter, covered in cobbler and sunshine. And I made a decision. I was going to do this. Not for revenge. Not to prove anyone wrong. But because this moment, right here, was worth fighting for. But even as I sat there, and happy and full of cobbler, I knew the battle was far from over. Rold hadn't sent the letter. Vanessa hadn't backed down. And the permit was still sitting in a folder on my kitchen table, waiting for a signature that might never come. The road ahead was uncertain, and the obstacles were real. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 3 days after I had called H.A. Rold. It was in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from the city. I opened it with trembling hands, standing in the middle of the kitchen while Maya ate her cereal at the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed and signed at the bottom with a flourish that looked nothing like H.A. Rold's handwriting. It was the letter of support. It was everything I needed. I read it 3 times, looking for the catch, the hidden clause, the fine print that would somehow make it useless. But there was nothing. Just a simple statement from Fowler and Sons Fine Furniture, confirming that Rose Montgomery was a person of good character and sound business judgment, and that they supported her application for a mobile food vendor permit. I didn't understand it. I still don't, not really. H.A. Rold had never done anything for me in the 30 years I had been part of his family. He had never offered a helping hand, never extended an olive branch, never once treated me like anything other than his brother's unfortunate choice. But the letter was there, signed and dated, with the company letterhead and everything. It was real. It was valid. And it was enough that I drove to the municipal building that same morning, the letter clutched in my hand like a winning lottery ticket. The woman at the counter took it, examined it, and nodded. "This looks fine," she said. "We'll process the application. It should be approved within 2 weeks." 2 weeks. I walked out of the building feeling like I was floating. 2 weeks until I could legally sell my cobbler. 2 weeks until I could start making money. 2 weeks until I could prove to everyone, including myself, that I was not a dependent. That I called Diana to tell her the news. She picked up on the first ring. "Rose, I was just thinking about you. How are things going?" "I got the letter," I said. H.A. Rold signed it. "The permit is being processed." She was quiet for a moment. "H.A. Rold, your brother-in-law. The one who's been stonewalling you." "The same," I said. "I don't understand it. I don't know why he did it. But he did. Maybe he's not as hard as he pretends to be," Diana said. "Or maybe he's red of you." I laughed. Red of me? I'm a 60-year-old woman with a bad knee and a food truck. And a spine made of steel, Diana said. "People can sense that, Rose. They can sense when someone won't back down. And it residential them." I didn't feel like steel. I felt like a patchwork of hope and fear, stitched together with duct tape and stubbornness. But I took the compliment anyway. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I ordered supplies from a wholesaler who gave me a discount because I was a veteran. I bought paper cups, plastic forks, napkins, and a small generator to power the refrigerator. I practiced making cobbler every night, tweaking the recipe until it was perfect. Maya was my official taste tester, and she took the job very seriously. "Mama," she said one night, holding up a spoonful of cobbler, "this is the best one yet. But it needs more cinnamon." I added more cinnamon. She was right. She was always right about the cinnamon. The day the permit arrived was a Saturday. I was at the church parking lot, polishing the truck's new sign, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. "Your application for mobile food vendor permit has been approved." I read the email. I read it again. And then I sat down on the curb and cried. Not sad TRS. Not frustrated TRS. Just TRS of relief so overwhelming that I couldn't hold them back. Lara found me there, sitting on the curb with my face in my hands. She sat down next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. "Good news?" she asked. "The best news," I said. "I'm legal. I can start selling." She squeezed my shoulder. "Then what are you doing sitting here? Let's go make some cobbler." I stood up, wiped my face, and climbed into the truck. The next 4 hours were a whirlwind of flour, sugar, and peaches. Ella helped, moving around the tiny kitchen with the ease of someone who had been king for decades. Maya sat in the passenger seat, handing me ingredients and cheering me on. By the time the sun was setting, we had made 40 cups of cobbler, enough to fill the clur and then some. Tomorrow, Ella Ra said, you're going to sell them all. I wanted to believe her. But I was terrified. What if no one bought anything? What if I stood there for hours with my pink truck and my homemade cobbler and everyone just walked by? What if the only thing I had to offer wasn't good enough? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, sta ring at the ceiling, going over every detail in my mind. The sign was straight. The clur was full. The generator was working. I had change for the cash box. I had a smile that I was going to plaster on my face no matter what. I had everything I needed. Except confidence. That was still missing. The Fa Remarry market was held in the town Squa, a wide grassy area surrounded by old brick buildings and oak trees that had been there since before the town was founded. I arrived at 6 in the morning, an hour before the market opened. The Squa was already bustling with vendors setting up their stalls. There were Fa Remarries with crates of vegetables. Bakers with trays of bread. Craftsmen with handmade jewelry and wooden toys. And then there was me, in my pink truck, feeling like an imposter that I parked the truck in the spot that had been assigned to me, right between a honey stand and a booth selling handmade soap. The honey vendor was a man in his 50s with a kind face and hands that were covered in bee stings. He introduced himself as Tom and helped me set up my awning. The soap maker was a young woman named Lily who had been selling at the market for 5 years. She gave me a bar of lavender soap and told me not to worry. Everyone's nervous their first time, she said. But trust me, if your product is good, people will come. I hoped she was right that the first hour was quiet. A few people wandered by, looked at the truck, and kept walking. I smiled at them, offered samples, but no one stopped. I felt my confidence start to wane. What if no one wanted my cobbler? What if Vanessa was right and I was just a dependent who didn't know her place? Then, at 9 o'clock, a woman approached the truck. She was elderly, with silver hair and a cane, and she wore a yellow sundress that looked like it had been made in the 1950s. She peered at the sign, then at me. Peach cobbler, she asked. Yes, ma'am, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Fresh baked this morning. Would you like a sample? She nodded. I handed her a small cup with a spoon. She took a bite, and her eyes widened. This tastes like my grandmother's kitchen, she said. She used to make cobbler every Sunday. I haven't had anything like it in 40 years. I smiled, a real smile, not the forced one I had been practicing. I'll take a full cup, she said. And give me one for my friend over there. She's been complaining about the lack of good desserts in this town. I filled 2 cups and handed them to her. She paid with cash, the first money I had reneged from the truck, and walked away. I stood there, holding the bills in my hand, and felt something shift in my chest. Someone had bought my cobbler. Someone had liked it. Someone had told me it reminded them of their grandmother. I wanted to cry again. But I didn't. I just smiled and waited for the next customer. They came slowly at first, a trickle of people who had heard about the pink truck from the woman in the yellow sundress. Then the trickle turned into a stream. By 11, I had sold all 40 cups. People were asking for more. People were asking for the recipe. People were taking photos of the truck and posting them online. A young man with a camera approached me. I'm from the local paper, he said. I've heard about your cobbler. Can I take a picture of you and the truck? I froze. A picture in the local paper? I looked at myself, covered in flour and sugar, my apron stained, my hair escaping from its ponytail. I looked a mess. But I also looked happy. Truly happy, for the first time in months. Sure, I said, standing next to the sign that Maya had painted. He took the picture and asked me a few questions. Who was I? What was my story? Why had I root a food truck? I told him the truth. About Frank. About the Wari house. About Vanessa. About the text message that had made me so angry that I had channeled it into something good. He listened, his expression growing more serious as I spoke it. That's quite a story, he said when I finished. Thank you for sharing it. I shrugged. It's just my life. Nothing special. He shook his head. You're wrong about that. This is exactly the kind of story people need to hear. The one about the woman who didn't give up. He left, and I stood there in the warm sun, feeling like I had just read something I had been keeping locked up for too long. That night, I came home exhausted but exhilarated. I counted the money twice, 3 times, just to make sure. I had made $300 RS. $300 RS from Peach Cobbler. It wasn't enough to pay off the mortgage. It wasn't enough to fix the furnace. But it was a start. It was proof that I could do this. It was proof that Vanessa was wrong. Maya was already asleep when I got home. I walked into her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and watched her sleep. Her face was peaceful. Her small hand was tucked under her pillow. She had no idea that her mother had just done something brave. She had no idea that the money in the cash box was the beginning of something new. Always, I whispered, repeating Frank's word. We're going to be okay. The article I read in the paper 3 days later. It wasn't a front-page story. It was buried in the lifestyle section, a small column with a picture of me standing next to the truck. But it was there. And people read it. The day after the article came out, I had to turn customers away because I had run out of cobbler by 10 in the morning. The line stretched around the corner. People had driven from neighboring towns just to try the cobbler that tasted like grandmother's kitchen. Diana came to visit me at the market. She stood in line for 20 minutes and ordered 2 cups. I had to see it for myself, she said, taking a bite. This is incredible. Rose, this is a phenomenon. It's just cobbler, I said. EMBA Rastik, it's not just cobbler, she said. It's your story. It's your face. It's the words on the side of the truck. I held your hero's hands. Now I hold theirs. That's what people are responding to. Not the cobbler. The heart behind it. I looked at the line of people waiting for my cobbler. They weren't just hungry. They were looking for something. Connection. Comfort. A reminder that kindness still existed. And I was giving it to them, 1 cup at a time. But even as I stood there, basking in the glow of my small success, I felt a shadow creep over my heart. The money was good, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The mortgage was still due. The furnace was still broken. And the Warri house, with all its memories and all its threats, was still standing just a few blocks away. Vanessa wasn't going to let me succeed quietly. I knew that. I had known it from the moment I walked out of the Warri house with my head held high that I just didn't know when she would strike. I was cleaning the truck after a particularly busy Saturday when I saw her car pull up to the curb. It was a sleek black sedan, the kind that costs more than most people's houses. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see who was driving, but I knew. I had known she would come. I just didn't know when. Vanessa stepped out of the car slowly, like she was taking a walk through a park instead of approaching a pink food truck on a dusty street. She was dressed in her usual remarry. Cream-colored blazer. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Heels that clicked against the pavement like a countdown. I watched her walk toward me, and I felt my hands tighten around the sponge I was holding. Rose, she said, stopping a few feet away from the truck. I see you've been busy. I didn't respond. I just kept wiping the counter, my movements slow and deliberate. I had learned in the remarry that the best way to handle an enemy was to make them wait. To show them that their presence didn't rattle you. Even when it did. She stepped closer, peering into the truck like she was inspecting a piece of merchandise. A food truck, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I have to admit, I didn't see this coming. When you walked out of the Wari house that day, I thought you would just go home and fade away like you always did. But you surprised me. I finally looked at her. Is there something you want, Vanessa? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I came to give you some advice. Friendly advice. You should take it while I'm still offering. I put down the sponge and leaned against the counter. I'm listening. Your little business here, she said, gesturing at the truck, it's cute. I'll give you that. But it's not going to last. You don't have the resources. You don't have the connections. And you certainly don't have the experience. You're a nurse, Rose. Not a businesswoman. You're out of your depth. I waited for the sting of her words to hit me. But it didn't come. I had heard worse from her. I had heard worse from myself, in the dark hours of the night when I wondered if she was right. But standing there, in front of my pink truck, surrounded by the smell of peaches and the memory of all the people who had smiled at me that day, I felt something different. Something solid. Something that told me she was wrong, that I'm doing just fine, Vanessa. Better than fine, actually. People like my cobbler. They like my story. They keep coming back. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. People like stories, Rose. They like the drama of it. The widow with the food truck. The underdog. But stories fade. Eventually, people get bored and move on to the next thing. And when they do, you're going to be left with nothing but a rusted truck and a mountain of debt. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I've seen it happen. Over and over again. I picked up the sponge and sta root, wiping the counter again. Thank you for your advice, Vanessa. I'll take it under consideration. She read at me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. You're not going to listen, I've been listening all my life, I said. I listened to your father when he told me I wasn't good enough for Frank. I listened to you when you told me I wasn't welcome in the family. I've been listening to people tell me what I can't do for 30 years. And you know what, I'm tired of it. She stepped closer to the truck, her heels clicking against the pavement. You think this is a game, Rose? You think you can just waltz in here with your little pink truck and pretend you're one of us? You're not. You'll never be one of us. You're a widow with a child and a pension that's rely enough to keep you alive. You're a dependent, Rose. That's all you've ever been. That's all you'll ever be. She said the word like it was a weapon. A final blow. But this time, it didn't land. I felt it hit the wall I had built around my heart and bounce off like a pebble. Maybe you're right, I said, setting down the sponge. Maybe I am a dependent. But I'm not dependent on you. I'm not dependent on your father. I'm not dependent on anyone who thinks they can decide my worth. I'm dependent on my own hands. My own mind. My own heart. And that's enough. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a voice called out from behind her. Rose. There you are. It was Diana, walking toward us with a wide smile and a bottle of sparkling cider in her hand. She looked at Vanessa, then at me, and her smile never faltered. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I just came by to celebrate. We got the official notice today. The grant has been fully processed, and Rose, you've been selected for an additional small business expansion fund. It's $20,000 to help you scale. Vanessa's face went pale. Expansion fund, Diana nodded, her smile still firmly in place. Yes. Rose's story has been generating a lot of attention. The foundation decided to invest in her future. They see potential. Real potential. She turned to me. Congratulations, Rose. UVA rened this. I stood there, my mouth open, unable to find words. $20,000 RS. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. More than I had ever imagined possible. I looked at Vanessa, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Fear. This isn't over, Vanessa said, her voice low and tight. This is just the beginning. She turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement like a retreat. I watched her drive away, her black sedan Desape ring around the corner. Thank you, I said to Diana, my voice shaking. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep going, Diana said. Say you won't let her stop you. I looked at the truck, at the sign Maya had painted, at the clur full of peaches. And I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been dormant for too long. Something that looked a lot like strength. Always, I said. I'm going to keep going. Always. Diana handed me the cider and we sat on the curb, drinking from plastic cups and watching the sun set over the town Squa. She told me stories about her own struggles, the years she had spent rebuilding her life after her husband had drained their accounts. She told me about the lonely nights, the moments of doubt, the times she had wanted to give up. And she told me about the moment she had realized that she wasn't broken. She was just different. And different was okay. You have something special, Rose, she said. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I nodded, looking at the pink truck in the fading light. I won't. The next week was a blur of planning. The expansion fund meant I could hire help. I posted a notice at the community center, looking for veterans and military families who needed work. Within 2 days, I had 4 applicants. A young man named Miguel, who had served in Iraq and was struggling to find a job that didn't trigger his PTSD. A woman named Sa, whose husband had died in Afghanistan and who had been raising 2 children on a shoestring budget. 2 others, older veterans who had been out of work for years and were desperate for a second chance. I hired all 4 of them. Welcome to the Pink Dream, I said, looking at my new team. We're going to build something together. Miguel smiled, a tentative smile that really touched his eyes. What are we building? Hope, I said. We're building hope. We spent the next 2 weeks transforming the truck. We added a second generator, a La Rija refrigerator, and a custom-made sign that flickered with pink lights. We developed new recipes. Peach and lavender. Peach and mint. Peach and honey. Maya was my official taste tester, and she gave her approval to every single one. The day we launched the new menu, the line stretched around the block. People had come from 2 towns over, from the city, from places I had never even heard of. They wanted the cobbler. They wanted the story. They wanted to be part of something that felt real and honest and good. I worked alongside Miguel and Sa and the others, moving through the tiny kitchen with practiced efficiency. The orders flew in. The cobbler flew out. By the end of the day, we had sold out 3 times over. I had to make 3 trips to the grocery store for more peaches. It was dark by the time we closed the truck. I sat on the curb, too tired to move, and STA read at the STAR. Miguel sat down next to me. I haven't felt this useful in years, he said quietly. Thank you, Rose. For giving me a chance. You didn't need a chance, I said. You just needed someone to see you. He nodded, his eyes wet. Yeah. That's exactly what I needed. I thought about Vanessa. I thought about the Wari house. I thought about all the years I had spent feeling invisible. And I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I hadn't defeated her. I hadn't even tried. I had just kept going, 1 step at a time, 1 cup of cobbler at a time, and I had built something real. Something that couldn't be taken away. But even as I sat there, surrounded by my new team and the RMTH of a successful day, I knew that Vanessa wasn't done. The look in her eyes when she had driven away told me that she was planning something. And I had no idea what it was. I could only wait. And be ready. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning. I arrived at the truck at 5:30, earlier than usual, because I had a RGE order to fill for a corporate event downtown. The parking lot was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I unlocked the truck and climbed inside, ready to start the generator and preheat the oven. But when I turned the key, nothing happened. No hum. No click. Just silence. I tried again. Still nothing. I got out of the truck and walked around to the back, where the generator was housed. The lock was broken. The door was hanging open. And the generator itself was gone. Not broken. Not damaged. Just gone. Someone had taken it. I stood there in the cold morning air, ring at the empty space where the generator used to be, and felt the blood drain from my face. The generator was the heart of the truck. Without it, the refrigerator wouldn't work, the oven wouldn't work, nothing would work. And I had a corporate order for 50 cups of cobbler due at noon. I called Miguel first. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Rose, what's wrong?" "The generator is gone," I said. "Someone stole it." There was a pause on his end. "Are you serious? Did you call the police?" "Not yet. I don't even know if they can do anything. I need to figure out how to fill this order." "Stay there," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, his truck screeching to a halt in the parking lot. He jumped out, still pulling on his jacket, and ran over to inspect the empty compartment. "This was professional," he said, running his hand over the broken lock. "They knew exactly what they were doing. Cut the lock clean. Lifted the generator out without damaging anything else." "Do you think it was random?" I asked. "Somebody looking for scrap metal." He looked at me, his expression grim. "Rose, scrap metal thieves don't target food trucks. They target construction sites, abandoned buildings, places where nobody's watching." This was personal. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Vanessa. It had to be Vanessa. The timing was too perfect. The execution too clean. She had warned me. She had told me this was just the beginning. And now she was making good on her threat. "What do we do?" I asked. "I have an order to fill. 50 cups. I can't cancel. This is the biggest client I've ever had. If I cancel, I lose them forever." Miguel was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the truck. "I have a generator at my house. It's not as powerful as the one you had, but it might be enough to run the refrigerator and one oven. It's a stretch, but it could work." "Miguel, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," he said. "I'm offering. That's what family does, right?" The word hit me hard. Family. I had spent so long being told I wasn't part of one that I had forgotten what it felt like to belong. But standing there in the cold morning light, looking at this man who had shown up without hesitation, I realized that I had built my own family. And they were stronger than any blood tie. "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking. "Thank you." He drove home and came back with the generator, a heavy, beat-up thing that he had to lift onto the truck with a dolly. We spent the next hour hooking it up, testing the connections, crossing our fingers. When I turned the key and the refrigerator hummed to life, I almost collapsed with relief. "It's not going to last all day," Miguel warned. "It's too small. We'll have to run it in shifts. Refrigerator for an hour, oven for an hour. We'll have to work fast." "Then we work fast," I said. We filled the order. Every single cup. Ra and the others showed up and joined the effort, moving through the tiny kitchen with the precision of a military unit. By the time the corporate pickup arrived at noon, all 50 cups were packed and ready to go. The client, a young woman in a crisp suit, looked at the order and smiled. "Perfect," she said. "We'll definitely be ordering from you again." After she left, I collapsed into the passenger seat, too exhausted to move. Miguel sat down next to me, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Vanessa had made her move. It was time for me to make mine. That afternoon, I drove to the Wari house. Not the old Wari house, the one Frank had worked in. That one was still there, but Vanessa had moved the business to a new location, a sleek office building on the other side of town. I walked through the glass doors and into a lobby that smelled like new repet and ambition. The receptionist looked up, her face a mask of polite boredom. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Vanessa," I said. "Tell her Rose Montgomery is here." The receptionist picked up the phone and murmured something. A moment later, she gestured toward the elevator. "5th floor. She's expecting you." The elevator ride was quiet. I watched the numbers climb, each floor taking me closer to the woman who had been trying to destroy me. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a hallway lined with offices and the kind of art that was bought to impress, not to inspire. Vanessa was waiting for me at the end of the hallway, standing in the doorway of her corner office. "Rose," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "This is unexpected." "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to talk." She raised an eyebrow. "Talk about what?" "About your father," I said. "About the letter. About why he helped me." She gestured for me to come in, and I walked into her office. It was all glass and chrome, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. I didn't feel small. I felt tired. But I didn't feel small. "Let me tell you something, Vanessa," I said, standing in the middle of her pristine office. "Your father was always cold to me. He always treated me like I didn't belong. But he signed that letter. He helped me get my permit. And I need to know why." She laughed, a bitter sound. "You think my father did that out of kindness? You think he had a change of heart?" "I don't know what I think," I said. "That's why I'm asking you." Vanessa walked over to her desk and sat down, leaning back in her chair like she was preparing for a long conversation. "My father is dying, Rose. Did you know that? Cancer. Stage 4. He's got maybe 6 months left." I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know. Frank never said anything. Frank didn't know. My father didn't want anyone to know. But he knew he had to start thinking about the future. About his legacy. And that's where you come in. I shook my head. "I don't understand. He signed that letter because he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Not because he read about you. But because he knew that if you fell through the cracks, it would haunt him. He's been carrying guilt for years, Rose. Guilt about the way he treated Frank. Guilt about the way he treated you. And now, with death ring him in the face, he's trying to make amends." I stood there, processing her words. So he did care. In his own way. "Don't romanticize it," Vanessa snapped. "He's old and red and looking for an easy way to absolve himself. That's all this is. He's not a hero. He's not a saint. He's just a dying man who's afraid of what comes next." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Underneath all the ice and all the remarry, Vanessa was afraid. Afraid of losing her father. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of losing everything. "I'm not here to take anything from you," I said. I never was. I just want to build something for myself. For Maya. That's all. Vanessa Sta read at me for a long moment. You know, when I sent you that text message, I thought I was just protecting my father's legacy. I thought I was doing what needed to be done. But part of me knew it was wrong. Part of me knew I was lashing out at the wrong person. Why did you do it, then? She looked down at her hands, her perfectly manicured nails. Because I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself. Trying to be good enough. My father never believed in me. He always thought I was too soft, too emotional. So I became harrowed. I pushed everyone away. Even the people who might have been allies. I walked over to her desk and sat down in the chair across from her. Your father's dying, Vanessa. You don't have to keep fighting. You can let go. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her remarry. How do I do that? By acknowledging that you were wrong, I said. Not to me. To yourself. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I don't know if I can. Neither did I said. But I learned. And you can too. I stood up to leave. Rose, she called out. I turned back. Thank you, she said quietly. For coming here. For telling me the truth. I nodded and walked out of her office. I didn't know if things would change. I didn't know if she would ever truly apologize or if our relationship could ever be repaired. But I knew that I had done the right thing. I had taken the high road. And that meant more to me than any victory. The call came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after my visit to Vanessa's office. I was in the truck with Maya, testing a new recipe for a peach and honey cobbler that had been giving me trouble. The phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw Harold's name on the screen. I answered with a knot in my stomach. Rose, he said, his voice weaker than I remembered. I need to see you. Today, if possible. I looked at Maya, who was licking honey off her fingers. I'll be there in an hour. The drive to Harold's house took 40 minutes. It was a sprawling mansion on the hill, the kind of place that had been built to impress people who didn't matter. I parked my old car next to the fountain in the circular driveway and walked up to the front door. It opened before I could knock. Vanessa was standing there. No blazer this time. No perfect hair. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her face bare of makeup. She looked smaller somehow, like she had been carrying a weight for so long that it had root to crush her. He's in the study, she said. He's been asking for you. I followed her through the house, past the marble floors and the crystal chandeliers, into a room that was lined with bookshelves and filled with the smell of old paper and wood polish. Harold was sitting in a leather armchair by the window, a blanket over his legs. He was thinner than the last time I had seen him, his skin pale and drawn. But his eyes were still sharp. Rose, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Thank you for coming. I sat down on the couch across from him. Vanessa hovered by the door, uncertain. I don't have much time, Harold said. The doctors gave me a few weeks at most. I wanted to speak with you before I go. I waited, my hands folded in my lap. Frank was my brother, he said. My only brother. And I treated him like an employee. I treated you like a stranger. I was so focused on building my legacy that I forgot the people who helped me build it. I failed you, Rose. And I failed him. I felt the familiar sting of TRS, but I held them back. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to know that I'm sorry, he said. And because I want you to have something. He reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out an envelope. This is the deed to the Warry house, he said. The original one. The building where Frank worked for 30 years. I want you to have it. ISTA read at the envelope. I can't accept that. It's worth millions. It's worth nothing without the people who built it, he said. I want you to turn it into something. Something that honors Frank's memory. Something that helps people like you. Veterans. Widows. The people who get overlooked. Vanessa stepped 4-way road. Dad, are you sure about this? H.A. Rold looked at her, his eyes softening. I've never been more sure of anything. This is the only way I can make things right. I took the envelope, my hands shaking. Thank you, H.A. Rold. I don't know what to say. Say you'll forgive me, he said. That's all I ask. I looked at him, this man who had made my life so difficult for so many years. I thought about Frank. I thought about the Remarry house. I thought about all the pain and all the anger I had carried for so long. And then I thought about Maya. About the kind of woman I wanted her to become. I forgive you, I said. That he closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. H.A. Rold died 2 weeks later. The funeral was small, just family and a few old friends. Vanessa stood at the graveside, her face a mask of grief. I stood next to her, Maya's hand in mine. That thank you for being here, Vanessa said quietly. He would have wanted that. I nodded. He was your father. He was Frank's brother. That's enough. After the funeral, I walked through the Remarry house for the first time in months. It was empty now, the furniture moved to the new location, the machines silent. But I could still feel Frank's presence. I could almost smell the sawdust on his coat, hear his voice laughing with his co-workers. I walked over to the workbench where he had spent 30 years, and I ran my hand over the worn surface. There was a small carving on the edge, ba rely visible. It was a HRT with the word always inside. Frank had revetted years ago, a quiet declaration of the love he ride for me and Maya. That I knew what I was going to do with the Remarry house. It wasn't going to be a furniture showroom or a storage facility or a luxury apartment building. It was going to be a community workshop. A place where veterans could learn a trade. Where single mothers could build furniture for their children. Where people who had been told they were dependents could become independent. I turned the Remarry house into the always workshop. It took 6 months and every penny I had, but we did it. Miguel became the foreman, training veterans in woodworking and carpentry. Sa managed the office, handling the paperwork and the finances. Ella Ra came by every Friday to CK lunch for the workers, her peach cobbler filling the air with the smell of hope. The day we opened the doors, I gave a speech. It was the first time I had ever spoken in front of a crowd, and my hands were shaking. This building was built by people who believed in hard work and second chances, I said. My husband was one of those people. And now, I'm proud to carry on his legacy. This workshop is for anyone who has ever been told they weren't good enough. Anyone who has ever been made to feel like a burden. You are not a burden. You are not a dependent. You are the ones who hold the world together. The crowd applauded. Maya stood next to me, her hand in mine, her face glowing with pride. Vanessa was in the back, watching. She didn't approach me at first, but after the crowd had dispersed, she walked over. Rose, she said. I have something for you. She handed me a small velvet box. I opened it, and inside was a locket, almost identical to the one Frank had given me. I looked up at her, confused. My father found this in his study after he died, Vanessa said. It was your husband's. He had been holding on to it for years. I think he was planning to give it back to you someday. He just never got the chance. I opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photo of Frank and me on our wedding day, our faces young and full of hope. On the other side was a lock of Maya's hair. I closed the locket and held it tight. Thank you, Vanessa, I said. This means more than you know. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I know I can't take back what I did. I know I can't undo the pain. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. For my father. For myself. I reached out and squeezed her hand. That's all any of us can do. That night, Maya and I sat on the porch of our small house, the house that was now fully paid off. The furnace had been fixed. The roof had been replaced. And the crack in the ceiling had been patched up. Mama, Maya said, leaning against me, do you think Daddy is proud of us? I looked up at the stars, the same stars Frank had looked at 1,000 times. I know he is, I said. He always believed in us. Even when we didn't believe in ourselves. She was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, Mama. You're the bravest person I know. I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. You're the reason I kept going. You and your father's word. Always, she whispered. Always, I echoed. The next morning, I walked into the workshop and stood in the middle of the room. It was full of sawdust and noise and the sound of people working together. Miguel was teaching a young veteran how to use a table saw. Ra was on the phone, scheduling a delivery. A group of single mothers were sanding a long table that would be donated to a local school. I looked at the sign on the wall, the one I had painted myself. Always workshop, building more than furniture. And I smiled that I had spent so long believing that I was nothing. That I was a dependent. That I had no worth outside of the family that had rejected me. But I had built something. I had built a business. I had built a team. I had built a family. And I had done it all with my own 2 hands and a heart that refused to break. Vanessa came by the workshop that afternoon. She looked different, softer, like she had been carrying a weight that had finally been lifted. She walked up to me and handed me a folder. What's this? I asked. The new partnership proposal, she said. I've been thinking about what my father said before he died. About legacy. About making things right. I want to partner with you. Not as a competitor. As an ally. I want to help you expand the workshop. Open more locations. Help more people. If you'll have me. I looked at the folder, then at her face. There was no mask this time. No a remarry. Just a woman who had finally realized that being hard didn't make you strong. That I'll think about it, I said. And then I smiled. Welcome to the team. She laughed, a real laugh, the first I had ever heard from her. Thank you, Rose. For everything. I walked her to the door and watched her drive away. Then I walked back into the workshop and looked at the faces of the people who had become my family. They were laughing, talking, building. They were alive. They were hopeful. They were everything I had ever wanted. I looked up at the sign on the wall, the one with the heart and the word always. And I whispered Frank's name. Thank you, I said. For believing in me. For loving me. For teaching me that I was never a dependent. I was always the one holding it together. The sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the dust that hung in the air. Maya ran up to me, her arms covered in sawdust. Mama, she said, can we have cobbler tonight? I laughed and knelt down to hug her. Always.